Hey Waffle Gang, I do hope you're well. My name is Mark and today we're checking out some more Reddit stories, and if you do love a Reddit story, why not consider hitting that like, subscribe, maybe that notification bell too, and let's crack on with today's first story. Much love guys. Now today's first story comes from FewHunter2043 from the Am I the Arsehole Here subreddit, and it says, am I the arsehole for snapping at my mother when she asked when I would finally kick out my daughter? Hi, I'm fairly new to using Reddit, but I've lurked on some subreddits before, including this one. Anyway, on to my problem. I, 66 female, am retired but kept very busy by caring for my mother, 85 female, and my disabled husband, 64 male. My mother does not live with us. She lives in an assisted living facility where I visit her every few days to check up on her and see if she needs anything. During my latest visit, she brought up how I should finally kick out my daughter, 29 female. Let's call her Claire. Now, for some context. Yes, my daughter does indeed still live with me and my husband, for many factors including her rather fragile mental health. But what my mother does not understand is that, despite us being parent and child, we are not living in a parent and child kind of situation. We are roommates that just happen to also be family, because neither her nor my husband and I could afford places of our own in this economy. We are dependent on Claire just as much as she is dependent on us. Claire holds down a full-time job, which doesn't pay great, but not awfully either. She pays her fair share in rent, utilities and groceries, does her fair share of chores, and sometimes even takes over some of my chores when she feels that I need a break. I cook on weekdays when Claire has to work, but Claire has weekends off, so she takes over cooking duties then. She has a savings account for emergencies. She pays for the family Netflix account and even spends some of the fun money she has left over every month, which isn't much, on little treats for my husband and me. No matter how often I ask her to not waste what little money she has to enjoy life on us. So, with all of that as a background, my mother's comments made me pretty angry, because Claire does so much to not be a burden to my husband and me, despite me telling her that I love her and could never see her as a burden. I also fear my mother may have planted that thought in her head when I wasn't around. Meanwhile, all my mother seems to do is demand, demand, demand. She has nurses at her disposal in that assisted living facility, and people who do grocery runs for her. But she never uses these services and demands that I do everything for her instead. She demands all my time, energy, and attention. I suspect she may want to push me to kick Claire out so she can move in with my husband and I, and force me to be a full-time caretaker. I was already having a shitty day, so I just snapped and told her that Claire's living situation is none of her damn business. She started crying and asked why I would yell at her for just being concerned. So, Reddit, am I the arsehole for snapping at my mother? I think Opie had it right at the very end of their post there, that it's none of her mum's damn business what's going on in her home life with her daughter, etc. And personally, I wouldn't feel bad about snapping at her when you did. I imagine this has been happening for some time, like little hints here and there, and sometimes a snap at someone is what they need. But in my opinion, you're definitely not the arsehole for protecting your living situation with your daughter, but commenters say not the arsehole. Parents of any age love to judge their kids' living and financial situations, even when they don't have all the information. The economy is in the shitter. I think it's nice that your daughter is staying at home and helping you out. Does your mum know about the financial situation? Do you want her to know? Maybe it's time for some tough love. Lower your visitations. Even if she is your mother, you don't owe her anything. Family does not have the right to ruin your peace. Opie says my mum knows about our financial situation, but she thinks that's no excuse. A commenter says, does your mother pay include the grocery or nursing services, or are they extra? If inclusive, ask her why she's wasting your time and her money by not using services she has paid for. Doing that would help you a lot more than stopping supporting your daughter, even if she was dependent, which she is not. If she is concerned about your workload, she has that in her power to help, but emphasize you'd still be around to see her. Opie says these services are included in my mother's rent, but she refuses to use them because the shoppers always get her the wrong items. She is very particular about what company she wants to get her food from, and she is afraid that the nurses will rifle through her belongings and steal anything of value she has. Then some information about mum wanting to move in with OP. OP says yes, that's my suspicion as well. I'm still trying to figure out a slightly kinder way to say, I'd rather pull out my own fingernails and let you move in with me, even if C eventually moves out. On OP's husband, my husband isn't Claire's father. I wouldn't even hesitate calling him her stepfather. I met him when she was 23 and married him when she was 26, so he came into her life a bit late to be the parental figure. When they talked about it prior to us getting married, Claire told him that while he may have come into her life too late to be her father, in her eyes, there's no such thing as coming into someone's life too late to be family. So while she doesn't see him as a father figure, she does see him as family, and they have a great relationship, with inside jokes even I don't understand at times. Lol. So at some point later, OP did come in with her update and says, "Hello everyone, first I'd like to thank you all for your incredibly kind words and helpful advice. Yesterday, I sat with my daughter for our Easter tradition of getting together as a family and eating a big batch of my grandmother's pickled eggs. And while we ate and made a huge mess, which, if my grandma was to be believed, is essential to the egg's taste, I reminded Claire that I love her and that she will always be welcome with my husband and me. She seemed a bit confused by it suddenly coming up, but thanked me and told me she loved me too. When I asked if she had spoken to her grandmother lately, she said no. She hadn't spoken to my mother since my birthday. Today, I drove to visit my mother again and have a talk about what happened, and it went surprisingly well. I started out by apologizing for snapping at her like that. Regardless of my mental state, I should not have gone on the attack like that, and I truly am sorry. I sadly am the type to bottle up my feelings instead of communicating them immediately, and it's something I know I need to work on. However, I also told my mother that I'm not willing to talk about Claire's living situation with her, and asked her to use the facility services a bit more in the future, instead of always relying on me, because I have a life of my own and a husband who also needs me, probably more than she does. But I didn't say that part out loud. She started crying again, asking why Claire and I hate her so much. She talked about how Claire never calls and only seems to acknowledge her existence when she absolutely has to, and has now also turned me against her. She asked if I was really so sure that Claire wouldn't eventually start ignoring me the way she is ignoring her. I was getting very impatient with her again, but I was prepared for it this time. I managed to stay calm and ask her to think back to her interactions with Claire over the past 5 years, and the many moments of her being rude or downright cruel to Claire. I even named some specific instances Claire has told me about, and to put herself in Claire's shoes. Would she want to spend any time with someone who treated her like that? I felt ridiculous talking to my 85-year-old mother like she is a 5-year-old child. But when I told her that we love her, but at times we do not feel particularly loved by her, it seemed to actually get through to her. She stopped crying and told me that she didn't realize that her comments hurt my daughter so badly. In my mother's defense, Claire, like me, has a habit of bottling up her feelings in the moment and disengaging instead of communicating, unless she feels she can 100% predict the other person's reaction. So she most likely never told my mother that these comments hurt her, and just started distancing herself. My mother promised to use the facility services more and in turn asked me if we could go out and do something fun every now and then. Her definition of fun is usually going to the casino with a very strict enforced budget. So we'll see about that. It doesn't sound terrible for some mother-daughter bonding time. I'm not sure how things will develop now, but I'm hopeful. I will tell Claire what her grandmother and I talked about today, and see if she's maybe willing to give her a chance to make amends. I won't push her though. Thank you again for all the helpful advice and encouragement. If I'm being totally honest on the back of this one, I had very little sympathy for the grandma at the end of this one. You know, she didn't realize that her comments hurt the daughter so badly. I mean, come on. Trying to get her kicked out of her own home and then trying to act all surprised Pikachu face about it. It's not really hard to learn that if you treat someone like shit, they're not going to want anything to do with you. But what do you guys make of this situation? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. And let's move on to another story. Now, our next story comes from Lawtony, who says, "Am I the arsehole for flipping out on my brother for accusing my mum of wearing a white dress to his wedding?" So, here's the deal. I'm the younger sister in a very complicated family, and things have been tense since my brother George got married to Jennifer. To give you some background, My relationship with Yennefer has been rocky from the start, and she's not exactly warm to my mum or any of my other relatives. Anyway, the issue came up during our civil ceremony where my mum wore this beautiful cocktail dress that has a white base, but the overlay is this bold, dark blue lace with ruffled sleeves. Well, Yennefer lost it. She completely flipped out and wanted to kick my mum out of the wedding, but somehow refrained from doing so. Since then, although every time there's a family conflict, Yennefer and George always bring up the fact that my mum wore white at the wedding. Yes, she wore white, but it's literally not white. It's a white base with blue lace. I can't even. Now, almost a year later, my mum tries to talk things through with the family and rebuild the relationship. And George hits her with a list of grievances, including, "You haven't apologized to Yennefer for wearing white." I'm honestly about to lose it. Like, we're still going back to this ridiculous dress issue. My mum is genuinely confused about why this is even a problem, and I'm just trying to defend her. I feel like it's completely unfair to keep bringing up something this petty, and at this point, I can't help but feel like it's just another excuse to attack her. Am I the arsehole for wanting to stand up for my mum over this dumb dress situation? I don't get why it's such a big deal. And OP did share a pic of the dress, which I will show on the YouTube video, but for the podcast users, I can explain what OP did really. It's a dress that's got a white background to it, but majority of it is blue, I would say. But there were some relevant comments to this one. The first commenter said, who was downvoted by the way, says, "She shouldn't be confused. Everyone knows not to wear white to a wedding unless you're the bride. Your mum was pulling attention from his wife. He was right to speak up for her honor. The mum should have just been the bigger person and have apologized." OP says, "But if you see the picture though, is the dress actually white?" OP responds to a longer comment that was describing the relationship with her brother and his fiance, the wedding dress, the wedding plans and rules, and OP says, "This comment resonated heaps with the situation. George has always been my best friend. However, he met Yennefer and a few months later they started living together and we, as in his family, didn't know her. Since we met her, she has always been quite defensive and I didn't blame her. By no means I pretend we are angels. But everything started feeling even more icky when they engaged weeks after I announced me moving abroad. When I asked about the possibility of, one, if there are 2 weddings to happen in January instead of October, since I'll be working on my dissertation, so I could attend the ceremony, and they answered, "Our personal life doesn't revolve around you." But then my brother was sad because I didn't make the effort to attend. They requested no children, which, I mean, fair enough, but when Aaron asked about bringing his sons to the photo shoot and they would leave with their babysitter, they said absolutely not. Fast forward to the photo shoot, there's heaps of children from her side. Then OP goes on to describe the relationship between George and their mother and says, "I mean, all of our relationships with our mum are quite cautious. She's rather childish sometimes to be a mum, and we pay the consequences. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that even through the divorce, she fought tooth and claw for me when I was a minor, and George lived with part of my alimony. He needs therapy, however. Yennefer convinced him to go to her therapist and to be treated as individuals and not as a couple. My guess, they're just coercing him." OP explains Yennefer's behaviors towards the family regarding the wedding planning and says, "We weren't involved in the wedding planning. Not by our choice, we were just excluded. She is definitely not shy. Everything started after she fought with my other sister-in-law, Galinda, and my mum took Galinda's side and ever since then just went berserk towards the family. I actually defended Yennefer that time, but when Yennefer started vendetta even against my nephews, literally toddlers, I said enough is enough. And then I became another enemy, over my sister-in-law Galinda calling out George's behavior. After he left my other brother Aaron trapped with a tenancy, he just said to drop it and leave Aaron with the whole responsibility of paying the full rent so that George could live with Yennefer. Aaron lost a lot of money but didn't fight over it. However, his wife Galinda called him out and Yennefer defended George and Galinda basically told her to back down. My family has communication issues, and I do believe Yennefer's feelings were hurt. I defended her throughout this process. However, I just can't sit and see how they shred my mum for a fucking dress." So, at some point later, OP came in with an update and said, "Hi guys, some people have asked for an update for my story. I tried to approach it as calmly and used many of the amazing arguments you all shared. He did acknowledge that it wasn't really about the dress, but more about the person wearing it, which honestly brought me some clarity. I tried to go deeper and address the root issues that have driven this divide in our family. For some context, I moved abroad to study for my master's, and shortly after, George and Yennefer announced their wedding dates. I wasn't able to celebrate or support him through any of it. Still, I tried to reach a compromise, traveling over 28 hours just to be there. But their date was right before my thesis defense, so I asked if they could consider adjusting it slightly. The response I got was, "Our personal life doesn't revolve around you." That absolutely crushed me. Many of you asked what our relationship was like before Yennefer entered the picture. The truth is, I always considered George my best friend. He's 5 years older than me, and growing up, he saw the abuse I went through from our parents. He always tried to shield me from it, and I loved him deeply for that. I'll be honest, my family is far from perfect. My mum has her own mental health struggles, and my dad is narcissistic and controlling. They divorced when I was 13 and George was 18. Despite everything, my mum fought tooth and nail for a fair alimony to support both George and me, and I've worked hard to understand, forgive, and appreciate how far she's come. But something in George changed. Suddenly, we all became villains in his narrative. The bond we once had, the years of mutual support and shared struggles, vanished. Now everything revolves around Yennefer being the victim, and the rest of us are painted as threats or enemies. I supported them from the start. I recognized the power imbalance and knew they'd need allies. But the moment I pointed out that they too might be contributing to the tension, I became the problem. I could say so much more, but right now I just feel numb. I lost my brother, and I feel completely broken. Thank you all for the support, your kind words, and your advice. It means more than I can say. Opie adds an example of Yennefer playing as the victim in a scenario. Opie says it's been rocky from the start. George met Yennefer through an app and didn't introduce her until they were about to move in together. That meant breaking the lease with our brother, Aaron, causing him financial loss and project delays. George never took responsibility. During a family trip, Aaron and his wife called him out, not in the best way, and Yennefer jumped in to defend him. Things got tense fast. Later that night, Yennefer lashed out at Aaron's wife, calling her controlling, toxic, and telling her to go to therapy in a really aggressive way. My mum took Aaron's wife's side, and since then, the family dynamic has completely fallen apart. A commenter says to OP, "Just another perspective to think about because I haven't seen it typed out. You said the following things, and please correct me if I misunderstood. 1. You and your brother went through abuse in your childhood at the hands of your parents. 2. The two of you were very close growing up. 3. You mended your relationship with your mother. 4. He admitted that the dress was not the actual problem. This might be a far reach, but it could be that he hasn't and doesn't want to forgive your mum for how his childhood was, and you forgiving her makes him feel betrayed, and thus he is now mad at you for forgiving her, at her for his childhood. Whether it is because she abused him or didn't protect him, I don't think you said that. I imagine that him being older probably means that he had to endure more abuse, at least counting the years, and distancing himself." Opie says, "I absolutely see where you're coming from, but I've been in therapy for years now, and for most of that time, I was ridiculed for it by my entire family, every single one of them. I'm aware of the abuse we all faced. He is the middle child, I'm the youngest one. However, I was the main focus of my mum's abuse because I was way younger when my dad left the family. Despite that, I've always tried to be the mediator, the one holding things together. I've raised my voice multiple times for my two brothers to get help, but this is labeled like girl/weak stuff, and now I'm being painted as something I'm not. It's incredibly frustrating and hurtful to be portrayed in a way that completely erases all the effort and growth I've put in." Commenter says to OP, "If your mother abused you, why are you defending her? It obviously isn't about the dress, it's about how she treated her children. Stop trying to be on the side of a person who abused you." OP says because she's working to be a better mum, and I've been aware of that for a long time. Of course, building my own boundaries and limits, but he completely overlooks that, except when he needed her, like the time they needed someone to sign a lease on their behalf. Commenter says, in quotes, "But their date was right before my thesis defense, so I asked if they can consider adjusting it slightly," and then says, "In my experience, however wedding dates are set much more in advance than defense dates. so I can understand any anger about that. OP replied saying, I can see where you're coming from. In my program, everything was set in the beginning. I'm a foreign student and I have a strict time lapse to finish, and October was the month. But I can see how that can cause confusion. Commenter says, was that timeline known to your brother prior to him establishing the wedding date? That would give you a little bit of a leg to stand on to request the date to be moved. Otherwise, as your brother said, this decision doesn't revolve around you. OP says, I got into my program in 2019. I started in 2020 and had all the dates he met her in 2021. Commenter says, let me rephrase. Did he know specifically when your defense would be? Was it locked down, set in stone from the very beginning? Or was it a window of could be from this X month to Y month, where you might have some flexibility yourself and he didn't know? OP says, yeah, I announced the month since a year earlier. Again, my program has months defined for everything. Research proposal in February, defense in October, and graduation in December. The visa time frame in Australia is very strict, so everything is set in stone. I was very communicative about this. He just says October is their month and that's it. And then one more commenter says, I think you're underestimating how much damage your willingness to forgive, forget, and sweep under the rug the abuse you suffered as children would have been for your brother. Why are you fighting so hard to defend your mother, even if she's trying to be a better person? I don't think therapy teaches blind forgiveness, and nor should it. That's just rug sweeping, and you aren't doing yourself any favors by being her flying monkey over this issue. OP says, I'm sorry, but you're making huge assumptions. I don't blindly forgive my mother. My progress in therapy hasn't been about pretending the past didn't happen. I fully recognize that my mom has messed up a lot, but I also have the emotional maturity to acknowledge the work she's done to grow and be better. What I don't agree with is blind resentment. That hasn't helped anyone. My older brother and I are not our mom, and to lump us all together as if we're the same is completely unfair. The three of us, my brothers and I, supported each other through incredibly hard times. To now be painted alongside my older brother with the same brush, as if none of that history matters, is honestly foul. I try to mend things, not because I'm naive, but because this is my family, and watch it unravel like this is heartbreaking. And I think everyone afterwards was just pointing out how it wasn't about the dress in the end, but it sounds more like about what George went through, his trauma from the abuse that he suffered, and it probably wasn't the same as hers, and he's not willing to forgive or move on, etc., in the same way that OP is. But what do you guys make of this situation? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. Maybe you got a different take on the matter. Let us know your thoughts, and just a huge thank you for being here, getting involved in the stories, your love, your support, your time. It always means the absolute world to me. So thank you so much. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Take care and much love.